Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. On this episode, we've been to two big meetings this week. Here's summaries of the Land Investment Expo and the Iowa State Crop Advantage Series in Burlington, Iowa that we host.
Hi, this is Joe Mershman. Welcome to Mershman Seeds Cup of Joe. Today we have Ben, Lynn, and Dylan, and we would like to give you a report of two different meetings that we attended this past week. One of them was the Land Investment Expo held in Des Moines, and the other one was our Crop Advantage Series meeting we call Crop Fair, held in Burlington, Iowa for our local farmers and customers. So who wants to start off?
I think the right way to do is just start with a climate outlook that was talked about by Dennis Tody, and you and Dylan have some good notes on that one, don't you think?
Yes, Dennis basically kind of filling in for Elwin Taylor, who was always our anchor for years and years, but had some good points. He brought up some soil temperature climatology maps, and he's with the USDA, so he has a different perspective, and of course he covers a pretty good slice of the Midwest here. But there's some websites that we, by the next meeting, will have available to you. One of them was the soil temperature map, so you know when to plant and what's going on for fall and when it comes to putting on ammonia. But he also brought up some good information about we're getting earlier and earlier last frost dates, which means, the fact that, and then later and later frost days in the fall. So in other words, our growing season is getting longer, and they're studying that, and they have some new maps now that will show you when the average frost is, last frost in the spring, and then the first frost in the fall, which I thought was really interesting. He also brought up the point that we've been in drought literally since 2020. So I know when Elwin Taylor was our main speaker, he always talked about this major drought in 2025, plus or minus a couple years. So we may have had that. I mean, we've been in a pretty tough conditions here since 2020. And that leads into, he thought, because of the fact that our subsoil moisture is a little bit depleted, and there's a good chance that we will have a early planting because of that. So my advice to you this year, even though it's pretty cold out right now and snowy in most areas, get your seed delivered, get it where you can see it, because you might be planting much earlier than what you normally do because of the conditions that we have right now. So time will tell. But there's a lot of things going on from the standpoint of weather is constantly changing, but we do seem to be benefiting from the warmer climate that we're currently in. So good information, and we'll get some of these links up and get you information that can help you make decisions.
What do you have to add there, Dylan?
Back to Joe's point about an early spring, we need to make sure we have all our planter stuff ready. It's going to come quick. Just don't pull it out of the shed and expect to be ready to plant. Get it going. Get all your tillage stuff ready if you're going to do anything in the spring. It's going to come in a hurry. So
you're saying I should probably get the combine out of the shed, put something else in?
Maybe put your planter back in.
All right, fair enough.
One thing that he had to add, and it's a question that a lot of growers from all over the Midwest have asked, is the wildfire impact. And he didn't come down and completely nail it on the head, whether it was a positive or a negative, but I did agree with the three different things that he said about the wildfire smoke impact, is that it had the ability to cool the climate by 2 to 3 degrees, and 2 to 3 degrees during a stressful lacking of water is definitely an added impact. It's probably a good thing. The fact that it happened early enough in the season was also a good thing. It didn't happen during pollination or grain fill, so it was good timing to have cooler weather when we were lacking for rainfall. And he said that there are some studies out there that talk about how the crop uses the filtered sunlight through that smoke in a more efficient manner than if it's direct sunlight or the infrared that comes from clouds. So there's some positive things there. I have heard that as well from some other people, but I'd like to find that article and maybe talk about that on a couple of
I think he said he did, was it Ohio State that was doing
it was either Ohio or Purdue, I think, one of those two. But I did find that very interesting that he took that question on head on. So
yeah, there definitely was some type of impact, and he said you could build a case positive and negative on these factors, but based on the yields, I'd say it was positive.
Yeah, and there's speculation there too of maybe some free sulfur from that as well, if any rain event had came during that wildfire process. So, like you said, all kind of speculative or in the preliminary hypothesis stages. So, very interesting to see if, from a long-term standpoint, if we continue to have these wildfires, if we're not going to manage our forest and whatnot like we used to, if these are going to be a continual problem every year, and we're going to have to deal with aspects related to that moving forward.
And it goes into the drier sector that we've been in since 2020. You'll have more wildfires when you're in a dry condition. So maybe that's the way Mother Nature offsets things.
Correct.
Yeah, for sure. The next one, at least here in Burlington, was the Ag Market Outlook put on by Charles Brown. I don't have a lot of notes from that one other than the fact that $4.49 is the break even on corn for the 24 growing season, $10.99 is the break even on soybeans. For PLC to react, whether guys make that decision in March on PLC versus ARC, PLC would have to have prices below 401 on corn and 926 on soybeans, and they don't think that there's, at least looking forward in the futures contracts, it doesn't look like we're going to be dropping to those levels. So there'll be a lot of guys that stick with their ARC, which is both production and price. It's revenue driven. So
yeah, he's basically saying USDA is projecting break-even costs. Now that's different than what Turk predicted last week, but Chad Hart, the economist that been the normal speaker for the last couple of years, and hopefully be back next year. He told us this almost 2 to 3 years ago that we can't stay at these high levels. We're going to go back to break even because that's normal for farming, and the same thing with inputs and everything else. Everything's going to go kind of calm down. It's going to make it good on one end, but bad on the other. So you're going to have to put your really good marketing hat on this year to take advantage of opportunities based on your costs. And of course, he talked about if you owned your land versus renting your land. And of course, farmers that own their land, they're going to make money. I mean, there's just pretty hard not to. But guys that are renting land, it's going to be tough sledding a little bit if they're not using the marketing opportunity. So he did talk a little bit about renewable diesel. And that's where they're taking soybeans and crushing it and making it exactly the same as diesel fuel, for either aviation fuel or for for diesel trucks. And that looks very promising, and that could create a lot of demand as we head into the future. So, because they said California alone could use all the soybeans oil that we produce in the Midwest just for them. So we don't know how that's going to play out. Of course, we only have a few plants. There's a lot of plants being planned, but that's a thing to watch. But overall, he's looking kind of like for flat demand. Trend line yields is what they put in, which that hasn't happened yet, as we know. But in the worst case scenario, we're looking at break even, I guess, is what you would say. And if anything happens, it'll be positive. And then if we jump across it, we went to the Land Investment Expo in Des Moines, and some of their speakers kind of crossed over on that. And the interesting thing that one of their speakers talked about was that these wars right now have no impact on our markets at this point. Ukraine seems to be able to be exporting and getting stuff out. And so there's a lot of stuff going on, but so far it hasn't really, nobody's worried about food, let's put it that way.
And ethanol and the renewable fuels in that regard too, with the barrel, or the crude prices per barrel, to be highly effective, we need to keep that above $70 a barrel to make ethanol a very good, alternative where it's not priced comparatively. Not that long ago we had crude that was in the negatives. So one would think with all the stuff going on where most of the global production is happening or transportation, we would have some issues, and it doesn't seem like the market is reflecting to that where crude is I won't say a knee-jerk reaction to prices. It's staying very, very flat. They are predicting that to go up. So we do have the ability to to be able to market some ethanol and ethanol be a viable option. But yeah, no, you're exactly right that these black swan events have happened. We've gotten through them, and now it just kind of seems like we're on a coasting pattern, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, and he projected ethanol profits would be good this year based on oil price.
Yep.
And so within some of the moderation, a little bit of cool down of ag and everything, there's still some bright spots and still some opportunities.
Yep.
It's just not going to be quite as easy this year. We
had some good reflection from two different sources again.
Yeah.
A fun conversation to be had. Carbon is I don't want to say the new kid on the block when it comes to ag, but it's as we talk about different opportunities for the American farmer to make money. We're also looking at opportunities that landowners are looking to broaden their perspective when it comes to earning income on their ground, whether that be what Joe was alluding to before we're filming, that now when we're dealing with, I don't want to call it speculative money, but investment money, they're looking at below ground, we'll call it at ground or crop production, surface, and then above ground. So I kind of equate that a little bit when I was back at the bank when guys were building hog barns. It used to be when build a slatted building or whatever, that they would look at the price of hogs, you'd market the hogs, that's how you made money. Well, moving into the 2010s and 2020s, you almost had to have two different sources of income, whether that be selling the hogs plus using the manure to offset your fertilizer costs, or in some instances it was selling the hogs and buying feed or owning the feed mill to then sell. That was kind of the only way that some of that stuff penciled out. Well, now we're looking at ground with the price of the asset rise or the continual climb, that these folks are now looking at different opportunities. So I think carbon plays a role in that quite a bit, because there's potential for some pretty good money
below ground,
and carbon offsets that we have on the horizon. The speaker for ISU gave us kind of a breakdown of, was it about a dozen players that are in the game right now and what they're kind of looking at and the different programs that they're using to look at it. I thought it was kind of interesting though, when we're looking at all that and making the switch right off the bat. It's not potentially a big money making endeavor, but when you get to looking at in the 4 and 5 year, and potentially in some of these programs the 7, 8, 9, 10 year, then there starts to be a little bit of money coming into it. But for right now, especially for the guys that are going from, let's say, deep rip, running the field cultivator, and doing what we would call conventional, some of the cost of switching over to that doesn't necessarily offset the practice change, but eventually that money does come into play. And the big wild card to that for me is, what does the fair market value carbon, and how does that get passed down to the farmer? As the demand for that continues to climb, is there going to be the ability for farmers to make even more money than what they're doing right now? Because most programs I think I've seen is somewhere between the $5 and $10 per acre spot.
And it's just not enough.
Correct.
I mean it basically the speaker said no, that's not enough. I mean, that's not a fair share. And the other thing, the Land Investment Expo speaker said, depends on which administration is going to determine the value of carbons. It could be one administration.
The Obama administration was at $45
Yeah.
per ton of carbon.
And Trump was $3 to $5.
$3 to $5
And then
per ton of carbon.
Biden jumped to 190.
Correct.
So how you going to play in that arena
Correct.
when it's all over the board? So to me, that was kind of eye-awakening. That all these big companies all want to buy these carbon credits so they can say they're neutral, but it's got to be verifiable. It's got to be a change. So the farmers that have been no-till, doing all the right things over the years, strip, protecting the waterways, and every farmer does that. I mean, they're all protecting the land, but you're not going to get paid because you got to make a change. So it's a little bit foggy. I mean, for guys to say that below ground I'm going to make this much money because of carbon credits. Above ground I'm going to lease out some land to the windmill people and make some money that way. And surface wise, I'm going to make some money. It's a different way to look at what the value of land is. And any of you that are looking at solar panel deals, or if you're looking at windmill deals, they said, be careful, be careful, be careful which company you hook up with. Because some of them put a whole bunch of money up front for you to sign the deal, and not as much money when they actually generate the cash. Some of them never generate the cash because they're just trying to get all this stuff leased so they can resell it and make their money that way. And unless they're building projects, and you can say, hey, how many projects have you built? Don't go with them unless they're actually building project, because the money is made after the project is up, not before.
Yep. Make sure that you're bonded. Make sure that the people that you're working with are bonded. And
then if you have a windmill opportunity, they said make sure you have, what was the term they used?
The decommission?
Decommission. In other words, okay, the windmills have spent and they no longer need them. You know, who's going to restore the land and bring it back to the way it was? Who's going to haul those massive towers away and the windmill blades? Is that going to be stuck on the landowner? They said, and actually People's Company out of Des Moines, they actually have a division that can actually work with the landowner to manage all these undesirables that come into play that we're not experts on windmills. We're farmers and ag people, so you got to make sure you've got some good guidance to make sure that's something you don't get hooked up with what I guess the term now is bad actors.
Correct. Right? I think that's a good terminology used with anything in these emerging markets, that there's going to be bad actors who are looking to make a quick buck or two and then turn around. I mean, we see it in every industry has something like that. I'm sure if you talk to a construction guy, the people that come in, after the storm, they want to get in, get out, file bankruptcy and move on. So there's always probably bad actors in the countryside. Just make sure that you're vetting the sources. And honestly, I think what I took away out of that, it's always good to have a kind of a third-party team behind you to help you make sure that you're making the most out of those endeavors and not getting stuck in a situation that, exactly what you said, you're going to make great money on the front end, but if that is tied to the actual performance of building the solar project or building the windmill, and that doesn't happen, are you out of luck? So
they talked a little bit about battery banks too, whereas as they do this solar thing and windmill, they have to sometimes they want to store that in battery, particularly solar, and they were talking about a battery bank, which is basically like a building, a great big battery, but they talked about some of the risk involved with that too. He said if you've ever seen that electric car catch on fire, I mean, you guys have been trained on how to put electric car fire out, and he said you get something that's a couple acres in size and it's a big battery bank. I said you just get the heck out of Dodge, because there's nothing that's ever going to put it out. I mean, so you got to understand the risks. Even though it takes less land for a battery bank, there's some huge environmental and catastrophic problems that could happen if it would catch on fire. So just a lot of stuff to, again, that can generate revenue off your farm, particularly land that maybe is not as productive. They talked about pipelines too, and how that is underground income. But anyhow, it's a different way to think about land when you buy an acre of land. You think about above and below and surface.
Absolutely. Probably for the sake of time, we want to roll into one of the outbreaks.
Yeah, I'll talk about. So I sat through a herbicide discussion from the University of Illinois, and it was a pretty broad topic on herbicide and weed resistance, and I just thought it was really interesting that they some of the comments that stood out to me during that is talking about some water hemp populations in the state of Illinois that now has 5- and 6-way resistance. The one that was really I don't want to say ironic, because that's not the right term, but a certain population that they knew had never had 2,4-D application on it had resistance to 2,4-D. So talking about target site and non-target site resistance, and then golly, brain fart, adaptations. that some of these weeds, that it's not resistance, it's adaptation, but it's really hard for universities and other people to try to research and quantify it because they need to do it at scale and have the time. So one of them might be that, velvet leaf has now made its leaf surface bigger, so that way it can survive, the first punch of herbicide. Or maybe lamb's quarter has now delayed its emergence to mid-spring or late spring instead of early spring, because it's known that, hey, pre's are going down early, I can't emerge, or I can't do my thing until that time has passed. So it's not herbicide resistance, it's an adaptation from I guess you call
it's a cultural practice.
Correct. So that was pretty interesting, and the one that kind of stuck out to me is that when we talk about herbicide resistance, it is the fastest form of evolution that we have in mankind right now, because what we're doing, we are almost pushing that at a higher level because of our herbicide programs, that these resistant varieties are surviving and they're reproducing, and they're just multiplying at a faster rate and evolving at a faster rate, that we are able to potentially see these evolutions one or two times in a lifetime. Where we think of, and I agree with the lady, the speaker, that when we think of the evolution, we think of the average human height used to be 5'2", and now we're getting to the point where it's like 5'9", where it's something that generationally takes, or multiple generations to get to that point. Weeds, we're seeing it and measured in decades, not centuries.
Yep.
Another comment and a good source is at the Land Investment Expo, the speaker was talking about making sense of the current farmland market. Getting back to land a little bit, it was Bruce Sherrick from the Center for Farmland Research, University of Illinois. Definitely want to look up his data because if you're a buyer in farmland, he had some good information. Basically, he said land has been up 50 to 60% the last 3 years, and he does what's called a National Land Value Report, and gives good long-term statistics on land. But I think he said at the end that basically, if you're looking at land as a 30-year investment, it's never been wrong to invest in land. If obviously you got to either have cash or cash flow or be able to pay for it. But it definitely was still a good place to be. So, but again, we will try to round up some of these websites and get them up on the next edition of Cup of Joe's, so that you can dive into it deeper, because some of this information we literally just got less than 24 hours ago. And so because there's a lot of good reference points when it's cold, you can look at and kind of think about.
Absolutely. The last one that I wanted to hit on was the soybean cyst nematode, and I'm going to let Dylan fill in that, and I'll fill in where I feel necessary.
Yep. So we sat on a speaker, Greg Telka, from Iowa State. He talked about soybean cyst nematode. I thought that was pretty interesting because it's the yield loss that is happening every year. It's increasing every single year. That it's more and more research is coming at it, and so it's opening more eyes. So he talked about a few key points that I thought we should take some deeper looks into. And so with that yield increasing every single year, that we need to start talking about like our seed treatments a little bit, but then also like changing our planting practices, like a non-hose crop after a soybean. So that would be like corn. So then those nematodes, they don't overwinter, they will hatch, and then there won't be such a drag potentially in that next year's soybean crop. But then another one would be to never grow, like if you would plant a Pking soybean line this year, don't come back 2 years and plant a Pking. Plant a PI 88788, and to kind of alternate it, because Greg talked about he's maybe seeing some resistance already in Pking, and if everyone is using them every every single time that we're going to see some big resistance, just like in the chemistry side. So
yeah, you're talking about taking the curve from 3 to 5 years to hopefully 10 plus years when we change that management practice to not relying solely on Pking.
Yeah, SCN is the most damaging pathogen in our soils. $1.5 billion loss between 1996 and 2016. Randomly selected Iowa fields show that since 1995 to 2018, the odds are around 70% probability that you have it at some level. And if you have it at high levels, Pking can drastically increase your yield. And that's, Ben, you might talk to Pking a little bit about where our focus is on bringing Pking source of resistance into our genetics.
Yeah, and there's been a big push by MS Technologies and that whole breeding program to push more Pking lines through and focus more on Pking, and we are seeing the yield advantage. Now, whether that comes from the PI88s being drugged back a little bit, or because we have a broader footprint with a higher egg count, or we're finally decoupling that yield drag that can sometimes be associated with Pking. I'm not sure which one of it is, but from a percentage standpoint, the Pking varieties that we are going to be bringing into our lineup are yielding as well, if not better, than the current products that we have in the lineup. So we have a new 2.6, 2.7 that'll be rolled out for next sales season, as well as a 3.3. Pking line. That both of them are lights out in the MS Tech data. So, and a lot of other companies are pushing that direction as well. So
yeah, big focus on that. But as always, these Pkings and PI88, 788, and the other 5 or 6 sources of resistance basically can come into your breeding program. They look like a pea vine more than a soybean. So basically, you got to take it from the pea vine, where it grows laterally rather than up, and you got to put in all those traits and yield characteristics that you need, and that takes a long time. And so consequently, that's why it's so slow to move from PI88, 788 to Pking, and then to the next 5 or 6 that are out there, is because we're basically
starting back at ground floor.
Yeah, we're literally starting on the ground floor because the characteristics are so bad. So soil testing is what they recommended when you're doing the best time to soil test was recommended following corn, correct? Mm-hmm. Because then you know your base level going into soybeans. You can check after soybeans, but it's going to be inflated, because if you rotate to corn, you're going to drop those numbers with corn. You never get rid of cyst nematode, you just manage it. But the best time is to do those cores after corn, going to soybeans, and then you know where you're at.
I think that's really important too, from the fact that if you are, or you do have a field that's the 1 in 3 that isn't infected, that with the noise coming out about Pkings, to your point, there is some potential yield drag if you don't have some issues related to the soybean cyst. So,
especially if you're buying from a different company.
Correct. So that's the devil's advocate in me wants to point out that the Pking is going to be a great opportunity for us to combat SCN. Right now, in your opinion, we have some really good opportunities that have been able to step away from maybe the associated yield drag, but not every company potentially has looked at that from a yield standpoint. They're just looking at it that we have the ability to get a Pking in our bag. And what we have found is that if you don't have an affected acre, you could be giving up some pretty good yield in the other direction if that's not your issue. So that's why testing, once again, is so important, because if you sub 500, do you need the Pking out there? That if it's going to be associated with yield drag, that you'll be able to get a high yielding, potentially find a variety that's resistant in the PI88, 788, and be able to encapsulate that yield potential out of that.
And cyst nematode explodes, if I got this right, Dylan, is what, high pH and also dry soils, right? I mean, that's when the numbers will explode. So if your pH is a little bit lower and you have wetter soils, it doesn't grow as fast. It's still there. It's not going to go away. But I don't know if you knew exactly where cyst nematodes originated in Japan or China, I believe. But when we brought soybeans over in the United States and planted them, they didn't grow right. And it's because we didn't have the inoculum to make the nitrogen, the rhizobia bacteria. Well, so they brought soil over in chips and spread it on the fields to get the rhizobia bacteria, but they also brought nematodes. So that's how they came. So, they always say 1 step forward and a half step back, right?
That's right. No, so yeah, Greg had a really good talk and a good one-on-one on soybean cyst nematode. I did not realize that they are never on the same plot of land twice. They all kind of focus around the different research centers that Iowa State has. I mean, we publish their yield results every year. Those will be published in the Iowa Farmer Today, I think this weekend.
Yep.
So if you're looking at the Iowa Farmer Today, you can see some Mershman numbers in those plots for yield and soybean count or soybean cyst nematode count, but those plots are never on the same piece of land twice. I thought that was an interesting fact, and
which makes sense because they don't want
a checkerboard of hotspots.
Correct.
But I did not know that, so I thought that was
He's got
fact too.
almost 30 years of data now.
Correct.
I mean, so he's got the longest going cyst nematode testing of anybody in the United States. Greg Tilke is the man when it comes to soybean cyst nematode, and he absolutely loves his job. He says, I don't know when I'm going to retire, but my wife does, or some kind of comment like that. He just loves his job, and we've had him speak several times, and he always brings good content. So Greg Tilke, hats off to him for what he's doing in the area of education on cyst nematode and management.
Absolutely.
Anything else we'd like to add? When we get into next week's session, we'll probably remember something else and we'll bring it up, but we'll try to get all those links that were passed on to us on the weather and on the different things that were available so that you can dive into this on a cold day and stretch your mind a little bit about how things are changing. It's constantly changing. Well, that brings us to a couple corny jokes, and I got a little confession here. First of all, I got a parking ticket yesterday in Burlington, but I'm not sure why. I'm just absolutely not sure why. The sign said, "Fine for parking." Okay. All right. And this other one, I'm going to reveal a little bit about my personality. I don't know if you knew this, but I have this problem. I'm trying to get over it. I'm a kleptomaniac. You know what a kleptomaniac is? That's somebody that's got an uncontrollable desire to steal things, okay? So I saw that there was a kleptomaniac convention, and, they actually had a championship tournament. I took gold, silver, and bronze. Okay. That was a long explanation for a corny joke, wasn't it? Anyhow, thanks for watching this week and or listening if you're doing it by podcast. We sincerely appreciate your business. Don't forget, we still have our cash discounts in effect till the end of Monday, so you haven't missed out yet to save double-digit on the annual basis on your cash discount on the annual basis. We sincerely appreciate your business. We hope your family is safe and going to be warm next week, and take care.